Okay, so here we are. We're going to go through writing an offer. So this presentation is more about the art, for lack of a better term, of writing an offer, not the actual act of writing the contract, just the steps that I typically go through and why I do those things and how they might possibly help you. Except, there we go. So overview, we're going to talk about like all of these topics, how to get details, where to get your listing and supplement to do it, right? Where to get them, how to review them, how to do, not how to do comps, but that you should do comps. And that may be something we have to go through more in training, contacting the listing agent, why you should do that and how to do it. Having the right touch bases with your buyer and disclosing the disclosures that you have to go through, the contract package, presenting that offer, handling counter offers, and then we will go on to under contract kickoff, which is actually a whole other, that leads into another presentation entirely. And I cannot, okay. So first thing you're going to do is, depends how you came into the fact that you're going to write an offer. So you're going to understand from your client, where do they think they want to make an offer? And they may not know. You may have to help them. And so there's some other slides here about doing comps and having your own opinion, right? And so by the time you're asking your client and you're going to determine their offer price, but that's going to be a conversation, right? Dorothy is doing a lot of this right now. She's actually got a residential client that was referred to us, and they're in very competitive. They probably put 4 or 5 offers in already. So we do a lot of conversation about the desired offer price is maybe not the right word, but what's the offer price? What's the offer structure that's going to get you to win that if it's competitive? And otherwise, if it's not competitive, or maybe it's been on the market for like 60 days, that's a completely different price. So you need to figure out where you're going to offer. That's a conversation with your buyer and after doing some research. Usually earnest money is about 1% of the of the offer price. So I generally tell people that. I also, depending on how new they are, I make sure that they know what earnest money is, right? Earnest money, I describe it like it is, if you think about it like a security deposit on a lease, right? You're putting that money down. It comes to you at closing. It is part of the total amount of money that you will put into the sale, but you put it down against the contract showing that you are operating in good faith, and you do stand to lose that money if you were to break the contract outside of its constructs, right? As long as if you leave the contract within the planned contingencies and so forth, you're fine. You should plan to get your earnest money back. But both parties do have to agree before anybody gets their earnest money back in the time that they separate it. You will also need to have in your hand proof of funds or a pre-approval letter. You wouldn't believe how many times this actually isn't the case. Every person that I talk to knew. I encourage them to get that and send it to me before I spend a lot of time looking at property. It's delicate. Sometimes people think when you're doing that, it's because you believe that they don't have money, right? And so I often repeat, like, I'm not questioning your financial capability, but here's the reality of what's happening with offers these days. When something is new on the market, it's often going to go under contract in a matter of days, usually less than 5, and often over the weekend. So if you're needing me to submit an offer after 5 o'clock on any weekday or on the weekends, you may not be able to get an immediate pre-approval from your lender. So it's my recommendation that you go get this, because we also need to know the details of your loan before I can start to construct an offer. So I literally can't write you an offer if we don't have that. I try to do that in the most delicate way, because a lot of people do. You'll hear them say this, well, it's not going to be an issue. I have no question that it's going to be an issue, but here's where it will be an issue, is when we are outside of normal business hours and you want to write a contract, but I don't know what kind of loan you're using, what the terms are, what your maximum purchase price is, and who your lender is, with what type of loan it is, right? So it will, just so that you don't miss out on a property, I would suggest that you go ahead and talk with the lender now and have that in hand so that we can get it, because we won't be able to get it last minute. So then the contingency details, these we'll learn more about when we go through the actual contracts, or you may do that when you go through with Shelley, right? But we need to know, like, are they planning to have an inspection? If they have a loan, we have to put a loan contingency and an appraisal contingency. Oops, I did not do that. Okay. Good Lord. But the arrows aren't working for me. I don't know why they're not working for me. They work here. Okay. So the other things that I just added these in. So I am constantly learning and refining our process. You want to ask them, like, while we're writing this down, I'm sorry, I didn't mention before on the prior one is any special agreements, inclusions or exclusions. So for example, they want to have the refrigerator left. They saw washer dryer they want to have left. Those things, or they saw there was a lot of stuff in the basement, or the junk in the basement or the garage they want to be sure is removed, something like that. You put that in. Everything you put in here that's unique complicates your offer. So if you're competitive, my recommendation is don't do any of that, right? You can deal with it later, maybe, but more important to get the house or get the building, right? The special agreements, this is where we would use, sometimes we have to write what's called an escalation clause. It says that you'll pay more than other offers. It's a way of bidding, right? Up to a max. So you would put that in a special agreement section. But you need to know that if you're in it. So you need to know if you're in competitive space first. And then you need to know, some of these other things so that you can start writing the offer. You also want to ask them about any vacations, conflicts, conferences, grandma's birthday, whatever, that would prevent them from either coming to the title company if they're in St. Louis, or meeting a mobile notary, signing things and mailing them in, with using a FedEx drop off, anything like that, or that would keep them away from Wi-Fi or something like that. Anything happening in the next 30 to 45, and encourage them to think. I can't tell you how many people pass this question and then afterwards they're like, oh, I forgot I was going on vacation the second week in April, right?
I literally make them get a calendar out.
Yeah, go look at
Get
your calendar.
out.
Yep.
Show me your calendar.
Oh, and if
Shelley's saying she makes people get their calendar out and check the calendar in front of her.
Are you having a graduation? Are you going on vacation? Is
Yep,
grandma having a birthday?
right.
Show me your calendar, because for the next 35 days, we are in a
You have to be, right? It doesn't mean that they can't travel, but you definitely don't want to set any of their contingency dates that require activity on those exact dates, like closing. You definitely don't want to set something like a loan commitment on a weekend day, because you can't talk to your banker then anyway. So basically, if you set one for a weekend day, it's got to be done on Friday, right? It's the way I look at it. You can't let a contingency pass without having that fulfilled, or you are stopping your buyer from having the right to do anything there. So for example, the loan contingency, it passes and we didn't have loan commitment from the lender, and we were supposed to have it on Friday, but now it's Monday and you didn't send anything saying we don't have loan commitment. It's too bad, so sad. We're done. You would have had to extend that date so that we can get the loan commitment and turn it in. So if the loan commitment's passed and you didn't provide loan commitment, you no longer have a loan contingency, and now they can't get out of the contract based on that loan. So it's probably never happened, maybe only one or two times, but like you could probably still get out because they can't get the loan and they can't close, but it could put your buyer in a situation where they don't get their earnest money back. So you don't want that to happen. You also want to talk about desired closing dates, kind of related to the other one, but like you're going to try to spin it for Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, especially if they are out of St. Louis because of that FedEx overnight. So if they're FedEx, I did not touch that screen. Okay. Anyway, you are going to just want to have that all together and know exactly talk to them about what the closing date is going to be. Even if it's before they sign, just like, hey, the way I've got this, it should be about 30 to 45 days, right? It should be on a conventional loan. It should be 30 days. That would put our closing at this. I'm going to pick a Wednesday because it's really would be Friday, but closings on Fridays are really hard for everybody involved. And you're going to have to sign the day before closing, and you're going to have to mail that off to arrive in St. Louis on the day of closing and fund on the day of closing. So that's why I'm asking you these questions, right?
Or what if there's two buyers, and they don't live in the same city?
Right. So that is one time in 500 transactions that has happened. But yes, if the buyers are not going to be in the same city, if the buyers are not in St. Louis, and there are more than one buyer, you need to know where they will each be located, if they will be closing from the same location, or if it is multiple location. If it is multiple location closing, it could be fine, but you need to talk to the lender, because if the lender requires that they both sign the exact same piece of paper, then you have even more time that you have to start doing the signing. Because they will have to ship papers from one buyer to the other buyer, right? So, and then you're going to just ensure that they have read through the seller disclosure and the lead-based paint that you would have sent them before. Those are two disclosures that are important. Okay, so go. Okay, so listing and supplement review. So you got to read I will tell you 9 times out of 10 as a listing agent, agents don't read the damn listing, right? So you need to read the listing, right? I'm not going to read the listing if you're writing the contract and I'm approving it. I'm going to assume that you've done that, and I'm probably going to ask you 1,000 questions. But if you don't read the listing, you're going to miss things like this property is in a flood zone. And you're going to sign a disclosure that says this property is in a flood zone. And then your buyer who's using a loan agreement is going to have to buy flood insurance, and it's going to cost them more than they thought, and they're going to want out of the deal. And you could have prevented that. And so now you're looking at costing your buyer earnest money, right? And
Except that there is a floodplain.
in there, but they don't read, like, still, they don't read
They
it.
don't read it, but
That
the
you got to
buyers
make
read it
sure
out.
they read it too. You can sense sometimes that buyers don't read stuff, and you got to say, look, I'm going to summarize this for you. I'm going to write it the way that we agreed, but everybody's human, and you are signing a contract. So you need to read this contract and ask me any questions, right? Like, I don't even like to really go through it together, because then I think they have an excuse to not have read it and rely on my words. And so I say, read it, and then I can walk through your questions with you, right? So offer deadlines, right? So you need, when you're reading your agent listing, your listing, you need to read the agent notes. Specifically, this is where agents are talking only to you. This will tell you if there are deadlines, and you need to look for supplements and review all the supplements. Speaking as an agent who puts a lot in her supplements, I put so much in my supplements that nobody should ever have to call me for the most part. I realize people call for because of the same reason I say, you got to build that relationship. But people will call me and go, can you send me the financials? Can you download them from the MLS? Like, they're there, right? Everything in my listings, everything that you normally find in a listing is there. And there is a link to everything you would ever ask for on a rental property writer, which is how we ask for leases, occupancy permits, 12-year rental histories, lots of, or 12-year, 12-month. These are things that people ask for under contract. For me, I look at it and go, it's just another reason that my contract could follow through. So why not give all that information up front, so that when we put something under contract, we know that it's probably going to be very good, right? You'll also in your agent notes find if there are offer deadlines. So when something is competitive or new to market, they may say offers to be received by X o'clock at this time with a response time of this time, right? That's how you know that there's a probability that is going to be more than one offer, or at least the agent thinks so. Doesn't mean that it never happens that no offers come in. It's happening more and more these days, but something to know. As well, when you're in that spot and it's your, like, say, under 15 days on market, you should just expect that it's going to go at or maybe above the asking price, unless you think it's just really overpriced. But there's no way to know until after the first, 5-10 days have passed, if there's no offers that have been accepted, right? And so when there could be competition in a seller's market, you just have to assume at or above, right? So comp listings. So you're going to pull comp listings for the neighborhood and for the neighborhood and pull a report and also look at all of those listings. So on that report, you can get the most likely buildings and compare them and see what they sold at and how fast they sold. And that's going to tell you if you can also see what their net income was to their purchase price, you can see kind of what cap rate they sold at. And if you want to see an example of that, you can look at the documents I sent you yesterday with the 2 off market of my own property that I'm selling. They have a comps page. And so there I put all the comps. Like if you might think like, oh my God, I can't believe, well, Dorothy is probably the only one right now, but those are like, I can't believe you just asked $386,000 for a 4-family in South City on 63111. But what she might not know right now is that last week, 2 of them sold, one at 375 and one at 386. And both of them had the same amount of net income as my buildings do, right? So that's why I'm pricing it that way. It took them 40 days to sell. So I don't expect that mine's going to sell right away or off market, but there's a logic, right? So these you're going to have to, these criteria, you are going to have to use them fluidly to determine what are the right ones to use, right? Sometimes using too many criteria is going to remove like, so there's no comps at all, right? So if you just go down to one neighborhood, right? But other times, a lot of stuff, like for example, the Shaw neighborhood sells a lot of multifamilies. You can use just Shaw comps, and that's best because it's a unique neighborhood that sells very specifically. When you're down in South City, like the one I just mentioned, I used the whole zip code of 63111 because it's kind of similar, the property that's there, and the buyer audience. So that's something else that the last question is, who is the buyer audience? Reason being, dang it again, the buyer audience, if we believe they are owner occupiers pay more than investors. So you're going to have more competition. Days on market, the date of the sale, like what, date of the sale when you're looking at comps, like when did it sell? And the reason that's important, especially in 2022, the first half of 2022, we had 3% interest rates. The second half, we have between 5 and 7.5, sometimes 8. It changed how things sell. So using a comp from early in the year, if you have to, fine, but know that your buyer audience is different, now compared to then. Sometimes I have to go back 12 months. I prefer to go back only 6 months right now. But definitely 12 months for the next 3 to 4 months is probably not the best idea, right? Like maybe go back to last summer and no farther than that. So another thing that I do while prepping for the offer, before writing the offer, I contact the listing agent. I'm always looking to build a rapport, ask where they're at, kind of see if they can give me any advice in terms of, hey, is there anything that would please seller most, right? If you ask me about the buildings I just sent you yesterday, I'd say, I'd love to have a full price cash offer with no contingencies off market, right? And I mean, wouldn't everybody, right? But that, like, what would it take me to put it under contract right now? Right now, it would take full price. And if I had to pick between multiples, least contingencies, right? So there's nothing motivating me. I'm not under distress. The properties aren't under distress. I'm not going to seller finance, right? I'm not got a loan on these properties. I've not got any reason to sell them other than I want cash. That's something to know, because the number one annoying question that we're getting right now is, would seller finance? And I'm like, no, if they would, we would have that listed on the listing. Generally speaking, sellers are not willing to seller finance unless otherwise expressed. So I'm not, and the only reason I would go to one of my sellers and ask them that question is if they'd been on the market for like 6 months, and maybe I think they might consider it because they need to sell because their interest rate's going to go up or something like that. But somebody who owns it outright, like the one I had on 4260 Michigan, it was on the market for almost 6 to 7 months. And that seller is just, he wanted he wanted a cash, no contingency sale. We changed the offering multiple times. He put a new roof on in the middle. There were different things that changed the price. We raised the price in the middle. And he wasn't going to sell it if he didn't get what he wanted. And that was just what it is. There are other people who are like, well, we've been living here and we got to move because so-and-so got a job and I got to get out of here. Right. So time to close is important. So
And contacting the listing agent to see, you might need to add other supplements, or, you know, is it already under contract, but your buyer really wants it, now we have to add a backup. contract
Right.
writer, you know, so
yeah,
finding out where
they
this-
are, how
this-
much competition they
yeah,
have.
How much competition do I have? Do you have deadlines or whatever?
So lots of things to ask the listing agent. Shelley was just saying, asking them about other contracts, competition, maybe they've just gone under contract, about will they accept a backup rider, just lots and lots of questions. So the thing that you want to do while you're doing this, the tone and the whatever is you want to be building a rapport with this agent. You want them to feel like you're going to be somebody who is going to bring a strong client, who is going to operate in a business-like manner, who is not asking a bunch of stupid, silly questions like, well, can the pink flowers on the wall in the bathroom stay? Yeah. Yeah, a lot of little questions that tell them that you're not very experienced, or that your agent is not, that your buyer is not very experienced. So if your buyer is asking you that question, you can, like, for example, the square footage, you can go figure that out, right? Or you can just say, hey, look, they've not listed it. It's a 4-family unit. Usually those are they're 1 bedrooms. They're somewhere between 35 and 4,000 square feet, right? So I wouldn't go ask
No.
the listing agent that. It will make you seem like you've not done many of these, right?
You can look on tax records, but you.
You can look on
Yeah,
tax
and that's
records.
what-
You can
according to
go,
the tax
you can go
record, this is
find
what
out
it
on your
is.
own. You don't have, that's what my point is. And
Yeah.
if you feel like there's something that maybe you should be able to figure out on your own and not ask the listing agent, but you feel like you don't know where to go get it, then me, Shelley, right, one of the other team members, where can I go find this information? I would start there, because what you don't want to do is show your newbie hand, right? If that's where what you'd be showing, basically you're showing them that you know you're not their equal, and then they can take advantage of you, or they just might go like, I've got somebody right now, like I'm gonna train this guy, right? Like I'm training one of the listing agents, the buyer's agents that I'm working with right now, on every step of the way, having to educate him. And I'd much rather have I've had somebody come to me before and go, hey, this would be my first ever multifamily commercial level offer. And so I have a few questions, and that's, if you got to do it, then fine. Right. And I said to her, look, you know, I immediately started going, oh, you like this stuff? Maybe you want to come work with my team. I'd be happy to show you how to do that listing. But in my mind, like I'm now controlling the narrative a little bit, right? I'm kind of now going, all right, so this is the way you want to present an offer. You could do this, but the seller's not going to deal with that. So I'm not that I'm trying to be dirty or unprofessional, but like I'm still working for the seller, right? And so that's what I'll convey. But so you want them to have that feeling of a simple and smooth contract. I also verbalize that, like, hey, I'm just getting all this information because I want to put a solid offer together that when you accept it is going to go very smoothly. That's the way we roll. That's the way we try to have things happen on our team. And so I want to just start off a really good relationship with you. So if there's anything that I can do to make it easier on you, please let me know what that is, right? Okay, buyer touch base. How are we doing on time, guys?
What? 11:28.
Oh, good times. Okay, so your buyer touch base, right? You're going to call them. You're going to provide comps. You might give them the report, but you're not going to go, here's the comps, look at them, right? You're going to give them the written version, and you're going to go, hey, you know what? I'm looking at this one. I think it's priced well. I think there's going to be competition. I don't think there's going to be competition. It's been on the market this long. Generally, things in this market with these features are selling about like this price. Here's what I recommend, right? 50% of the time, they'll go with your recommendation. And the other 50%, they're going to want to do something really weird, right? And then so you you just kind of have to help them that you don't allow them to do something so weird that it's just a waste of time for everybody. So depending on what they want to do, I mean, I have told people that I won't put certain offers in before, like $250,000 building in a market where it's maybe a little overpriced, but maybe $25,000 overpriced, and they want to offer $125,000. Like, you know what?
Are we writing offers?
Yeah, like, or do you just want to tell me what you're trying to accomplish? Do you think that they're really going to agree to that price? Right? I don't. Do is that, and this is a lot of what we get is, is that your idea? And I wouldn't maybe say it this way, but asking a little different ways. Maybe this is their idea of how one negotiates, right? So a question to ask them is, where would you be happy if we ended up at what number? If we ended up at XYZ number, would you be happy? What is that number where you would actually buy this property and be happy between you and me? I can see if I can try to get us to that number, right? So if that number is 225, right, then maybe that's reasonable, and maybe we offer something like a little bit lower, blah, blah, blah. If it's completely ridiculous, we do present all offers. So a lot of times with that 125, I would go like, hey, Shelley, blah, 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 I'm calling about this thing. Hey, I got some questions for you. I'm not sure where we stand right now, but right now I have a buyer. I have multiple. And one of them's really wanting to make a low offer, maybe closer to 100, 150. I'm guessing you would never accept that, but I just need you to nod your head so that I can go back and say that seller would not even entertain this offer, right? Sometimes they will respond back and go, you know what? Submit all offers, submit any offer and we'll see what we can do. Usually they negotiate back. I mean, but some people won't have that more casual conversation with you, and they'll go like, you have to submit everything in writing, and that's their way of saying it. And you could be wasting your time, but I would try to talk the buyer into doing something that you believe is reasonable. And again, call me. You're going to end up having to run your contract through me for signature anyway. So get in a hot spot, then call me, right? So you're going to answer any of their questions about the contract or anything else. You're going to finalize the overall approach. You're going to make sure you understand traveler lack of availability, and talk through that timeline again. Well, you wouldn't have talked the timeline before, but you were just collecting information, right? Understanding location of the signers. First, signers will needed to come before, right? First signatures, right? So before you start writing an offer, they need to have signed a broker disclosure, buyer's agency, and a wire fraud agency. These are all, so you all have most of you have DocuSign accounts. The ones that are on my team have a DocuSign account and with me, and I have templates that I've created. There is a disclosures package, and we're going to go through DocuSign training, but then you basically the templates are made to help it be consistent and to help you through the process, but not to lobotomize you understanding what you're doing, because you may have to modify the contracts. You're never going to have them where you don't have to put data in there. But so anyway, you will use that and say, I would tell them, okay, the first thing we have to do while we're getting the rest of this data together, I'm going to be writing into their contract. I'm going to send you a packet of disclosures, right? You're going to get a broker disclosure. You're going to get a buyer's agency and a wire fraud agency, advisory, sorry. And those are required for us by compliance and regulation by our brokerage. And if it's the very first time, I usually explain about the buyer's agency. And I just say very simply, look, the buyer's agency is showing you how we work together and what my responsibilities are to you. And this contract also ties me to being connected to being paid by the seller for that property, the commission. It does have a section in here that often confuses people that says that you will pay me a 2.5% commission or a minimum of $3,500. I just want to explain that only affects you if the seller is not paying commission. And very, very rarely does a seller not pay commission when something is on the MLS. If we were buying something completely off the MLS, that might be the situation, right? But this is not the case for us. It's 1% of the time, if that. So please don't worry about it. If you're going to get into a situation where you're going to have to pay commission at close, I will let you know. We also, a lot of agents put additional commission on their buyer's agency. I put the word waived, right? So a lot of agents will go, well, I'm going to pay Shelley $350. So I'm going to put it here because my buyer has to pay that. And that I don't do that. I don't do that because, the buyer didn't ask for Shelley to do that. That is a service that Shelley is providing to me so that I can stay focused on selling and not on office work. And also because she keeps me honest when I'm going to draw outside the lines and a lot of other reasons, right? So she keeps things going for me behind the scenes and I pay her for that, right? Or if it's our team, you understand how we pay for that. We either split it or I pay for it depending on the situation. So, we share that with them. And so that most cases, they will never have to pay us something out of their own pocket because the seller will be paying them. So, right, if you didn't complete them, send them first, ask the buyer, sign and return while you're writing the offer. If you write them with the right timeline on them, you may be able to reuse them multiple times. Hey, stop that. Okay. So you're going to secure a timely closing, right? So can't repeat this enough, but also be sure to look for holidays on what during, right? So and the little holidays too. Any holiday a bank closes, a title company closes, right? And if one or the other closes, they generally close because the others closed, right? If they weren't going to. So you're going to skip over those days or whatever you choose to do, but you're not going to set any date on those days. So a closing date should be set in the middle of the week or as early in the week as possible. Neither should land on a weekend, right? And for out-of-state buyers, we already said this, but plan to sign the day before closing so that you get funded on closing day. This is going to save you a lot of problems, especially with apartment buildings who prorate based on the day that you close. And if you don't fund on the day that you're supposed to close, then usually people ignore it, but recently people have been getting more and more detail oriented. And so they basically, you have to go back. I just had a buyer and a seller have to send money between each other to
2 days.
over 2 business days.
So stupid.
Well, it was, but in any case, right? Unfortunately for that situation, the property management company, it happened over the end of a month, which further complicated things. It was set to close on the 31st of a month, and it did not close until the 4th of a month. So since it didn't close, we didn't hand over property management. The property management continued for 4 more days. The property management assumed that the property closed on the 4th, not the 31st. And so they collected all the rents and sent them to the old owner instead of the new owner.
Is that Arlo?
Yeah.
No.
sorry.
No, and but because we're recording, I'm trying to not say names and addresses, right? So I spent the better part of last week talking to both the seller and the buyer because the buyer's agent was incapacitated, for lack of a better term. She could not speak with us. And these guys were very urgent to get the situation resolved. And the property management was not of any help. They basically said that all happened at closing and we did what we were supposed to do. And so now the buyer and seller need to figure it out. So I don't necessarily agree with that, but I know how to prevent it in the
The
future.
seller should have stopped the property management
Yeah.
because that's not the buyer's.
But it was too late.
problem.
So they didn't know. So we all thought we closed. This was their first closing. They didn't, it wasn't his fault that they didn't close until the 4th. The buyer actually, another reason, they signed at 3 or so o'clock on a Friday in California. And then they didn't take the package to FedEx until Saturday. So it didn't, and Monday, I think, was a
You can't
holiday.
manage other people.
Right, and the money didn't arrive until, oh no, they didn't wire the money until Monday, so it didn't arrive until Tuesday. And so since it closed and was communicated as closed on the 4th to the property management company, they assumed that the title company had prorated everything so that normally the seller would receive the whole month of April, and the buyer would have until May to start collecting. That's the normal process. And so this was just a very unique situation that really got screwed up. And we got it done, but it was a headache. All right. So moving on along, right? Out of state buyers got to do the day before. Buyers have to know that they have to do their own mailing, right? So there are 3 different contract packages that we usually use. For apartment buildings, it's usually an as-is sale, and these are the contracts that we'll use. I put this together, guys, before I had made templates on DocuSign and decided to do like a team approach where you could just get these packages. So if you go out onto our YouTube channel, you will see there is a video for each of these where I walk through these contracts, and they still are mostly good information, right? But so typically you'll use a special sale contract, what's called a special sale inspection rider, because the special sale contract has no inspection clause. So unless your buyer is agreeing not to inspect a building, you have to put a special sale inspection rider on your contract. If they're using a financing contingency, you have to put an appraisal rider, because of maybe there's one that won't, but any lender is going to do an appraisal. And if the appraisal doesn't come out, you need this appraisal rider to be able to negotiate or get out of the contract if the value doesn't come back. And then a rental property rider, I mentioned this before, you have this on any occupied rental property. It tells you all of the leases, all of the deposits, all of the fixed expenses. And it is what you would use to plug information into your multifamily evaluator sheet to kind of know what's the possible income that would be generated from this building, right? So a residential sales contract. This is the one that usually a real estate agent is using, like specifically when they are helping people find homes. We use it sometimes when we are helping people find homes, which is very infrequently, but we get referrals from Real because we're small in St. Louis right now. So we use it then, but we also might use it on an owner occupy multifamily when somebody's planning to move in. And that's because it includes inspections. It includes the assumption that it is owner occupied. And so the seller holds the responsibility for getting city inspections for occupancy, right? And then the other 2 things are kind of the same, right? This residential sales contract does have an inspection contingency clause, so you don't need a rider. But the trick is, so it'll work with, you might need a FHA or a VA rider if you're using that type of loan. But if you're buying 2 and 4 families, you're right now, because it's so competitive, you need to look and make sure that it's not an as-is sale and they are planning for owner occupiers, because when they're stating it's as is, seller will do no repairs, blah, 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 blah. You need to make sure that they will accept an FHA or a VA loan, because oftentimes they are telling you that they will not. And FHA and VA can come with their appraisals requiring some sorts of work to be done to the building. So it's not an inspection, but there are issues of safety, and they are assuming that these clients do not have cash funds. So if safety issues or something else like that comes up, that they would not be able to do that work out of the gate. So that's why, right? So it could be complicated if you've got something. We've got an owner occupier. The first thing you need to find out is what kind of loan are they going to use. If they're using a conventional, but it's owner occupier, that's better than FHA or VA, right? And then so all contracts, you're going to have these disclosures. You're also going to download a seller disclosure if it exists and have that signed, and a lead-based paint if it exists and have that signed. If you don't get the lead-based paint, Shelly will come after you once you get it under contract to go get one from the listing agent and have it signed. Or if you're the listing agent, then you will ask Shelly to go, why did you not get a lead-based paint out there?
Sometimes if it's not online, because of the compliance part of it, your buyer has to sign the lead-based paint the day they make the offer. the
Yep.
client's side. So if your listing agent, you called them, hey, do you have this stuff online? Okay, I'll get to it. If they don't give it to you, I create one
Yeah.
and I sign it as the buyer, wherever I'm supposed to sign, and send it with the offer. And then
Yep.
the seller can re-sign mine, but
Yep.
compliance wise, it has to be signed on the date that you make the offer.
Yeah.
So if they're not providing it.
Yeah. So I would ask them for that.
Yeah.
A lot of times they don't have it or they don't know they have it or whatever, and they can get
Yeah.
one for you. But also, like, you don't want to go, I would like to avoid filling out a lead-based paint for the seller. So before my buyer signs, I want to see that they know that there's
Yeah.
no report, that they know they have no reports to give, and they, whatever they have to say, that's their disclosure to do, right? So I would force it to get done, but know that you may have to get it done later. And then also, sometimes there's not seller's disclosures on these multifamily buildings, but you need to have downloaded that. Make sure that you and your buyer have read through it. I do know an agent who made the mistake as a listing agent of not making sure that their disclosure was accurate. So for example, they knew their seller mentioned that there was a mice infestation. They knew that. They, did not put that on the seller's disclosure, whatever reason, the agent actually got sued, right? So it's not just like that you throw it over the fence and assume that your buyer is going to do all the right things. They don't do a lot of these offers like you do. You do them all day long. So it's like your big brother or something, right? That's why I say read the listing, read the disclosure if it exists, right? Know what your client is making an offer on. You are their shepherd through the situation, and you need to make sure that they are reviewing everything. And so if something stood out, like, oh, the roof's not new, right? The roof is 20 years old. Just making sure you saw that the roof's 20 years old, because now when you go through an inspection and they go, the roof is at the end of its serviceable life, I don't want you to be like afraid of that, right? It doesn't mean that it's got terminal diseases. It just means that if it did develop one, it might make more sense to replace versus fix, right?
The budget for that.
Right. And then the probably most important thing before you start writing your contract is that you have proof of funds, cash or lending, however it is. And that more and more people are getting creative with their lending, so that you make sure you understand the lending. So that's another thing to read, is their pre-approval. Is it conventional? You got to know how to write the offer, right? Is it a private money loan? I just got one yesterday. A guy sent me, he sent me a proof of cash funds for a private money lender and a very vague pre-approval that said, I'll give you money to buy property 123 Main Street. Signed, private money lender. Then a proof of funds of $72 million in a bank account for a private money lender. And first time, right? And I'm like, okay, maybe you can call me today to talk about, I think this is a person wanting to make an offer through me on my listing, right? Which is great. Seller's going to like that because there's not as much commission to pay. However, seller also is very well versed in lending, but maybe not private lending. But I would probably understand from the buyer how they believe this works, how they believe the private money lender works. Like, are they going to do an appraisal? Is it going to be a formal paid appraisal, or is it going to be like I can do one from my desk appraisal? Because some other private lenders will do that, right?
They want to be on title.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So we got to know all of that detail before we can write an offer, and be able, because it's unusual to talk about it with my seller. So I'm going to have to go like, hey, will you even consider this? Here's the situation. Looks like the guy's got enough money to buy it. He's going on title. He's not going on title. He says he's going to give that guy the money to buy this building. They already know it's got to be full price. He says he's going to do this kind of an appraisal. This is what he's going to have to do. He's already looked at the financials or not, or whatever. will you deal with this, right? And then I've got to know, like Shelley said, a lot of things so that I can write. If the lender has to go on title, then they're buying it together, right? But maybe he's just going to put a lien on the property at closing, like a lender would do typically. Could be a lot of things. All right, I'm going to try to click through this. So we're going to present your offer. Let's say we wrote it up. So remember I said we were going to skip over the actual writing of the offer thing. That's another session. So you wrote your whole offer and it's all signed, and you're going to send the complete package with the riders and seller disclosures fully signed by your buyer over to the agent. And you're going to call them to confirm the offer was received and summarize the offer. If you don't get them, then you're going to text them for confirmation of receipt of the offer. And when I emailed them the package, I'm not a big fan of like automatically sending through DocuSign where they just get this like automatic copy. Or even if I do, because time is of the essence, I will still download it and email it with a summary. You maybe got this for DocuSign. Here's a summary of our offer. We're offering this much money with this much earnest money. We have these contingencies. Buyer is very interested. I've vetted them out. They are solid according to their lender, blah, 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 right? Attached is their pre-approval. So, but I go like, until I get a confirmation of that and I know their eyeballs have seen what I've sent them, you are in repeat mode until you get confirmation of receipt. Failure to do that means your offer may get looked over and not accepted, right? And why is that? It seems like a simple thing. I will tell you, this was happening to me the other day. I made the mistake of putting something live and then marketing it on a Saturday when I was on the beach. And I had an automatic reply, and I wasn't even thinking, that said, call Shelley and Dorotha, right? Luckily, Shelley was on the beach with me. And then Dorotha was having a panic attack, right? And people were starting to call her for how to get a showing, because I thought we had a lockbox on the property, but it turns out that there was a little fib by somebody, or they didn't really put a lockbox out there. Anyway, some of these listings are so popular, and that includes multifamily listings. This includes the listings that I've been sending you that are high priced and larger than 4 units. I'm getting on my Hazel Crest condo package. I had so many people calling me that day. I was naming them: Shelley Hazelcrest, Dennis Hazelcrest, blah, 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 right? Dennis Hazelcrest, owner occupied buyer, right? A cash buyer, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, look, boo, email me, right? Like, this is not an emergency. I didn't mean to do that for myself, and I totally did it to myself, right? But I'm sure there is somebody, if I look how many Hazelcrest names there are in my phone right now, I bet you there are at least 25. And that doesn't include the emails that I got, and that doesn't include all the new leads that I got. And I think there were a total of 3 offers that I got in. But by the time I ended up looking at my email, they didn't text me to tell me that they sent me offers. All the offers had already expired. And I said in my agent notes, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, please expect responses, blah, blah, blah. And they don't read it. They don't read it. And so anyway, my point being, a listing agent, depending on how popular something is, can literally be swimming in this information. And so when you text them, you're going to go, hi, Dennis, this is Lynn Hart with Real Broker. I just called you, and I didn't get you. I'm calling about buyer offer, blah, 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 blah. I sent it over an email. I would really like to talk to you about some specifics. Please call me back. But you're putting it all in there in writing for them. So when their phone rings 100 times from a number that they don't know, they will call you back, right? I answer my phone as a listing agent. Most don't. Most do not answer the phones. Not reliably, right? So let's see here. Hang on. Come on, I didn't mean to do that. So I think there we go. So basically beat them up until they confirm receipt, right? Counter offers. So when you start countering, my preference is some people will just start doing the counter and sending it over without the rest of the package attached, right? I prefer that we keep the entire package, right? Because after the first counter, they should have signed everything. So when that final counter is signed, you have a fully all-in-one thing fully executed contract package, right? And so that is the way I prefer to do it, just to keep it neat and clean, and to keep it in a certain order, right? The offer followed by all of the other riders and addendums, you know, maybe the,
The last counter.
Yeah.
That is agreed upon. should be at the top.
Yep.
Because their broker is going to read that one first. so
Yeah.
She can say, okay, what changed?
Yeah.
Because we don't physically make changes on our offer.
Yeah.
She wants to see the
everything,
sale price change. Okay, great.
Right.
Don't look at that. You know what I mean?
right? So basically, let's say there's 5 counters.
Yeah.
At the 5th one, 1 through 4 don't matter anymore,
Yeah.
right? The last one matters. But so keeping that up there in that order, right? You have to
She'd
keep
rather
them
see it,
there.
She'd
Yeah,
rather see it at the top. And
Yeah.
you know, I can teach people how to
yeah,
separate things and put them back together.
yeah.
She would rather see it. at the top.
Okay, so then next, all offers for, okay, so this we should already know, but when you're making an offer, you're going to be using my credentials. So when a team leader is having offers made, they are using their credentials in the MLS so that those deals are connected to the team, right? If you ever have your own deal that you bring your own lead, right? Where you get the 100%, then you're going to use your whatever you are, D Herbert or whatever. Everybody's going to have a something, right? Like I think yours is probably June Lar or something like that. They try to make it 6 characters or D Herbie.
Our silver.
Mine's El Herrera. It would cost me $50 and losing all my history to change my name. I'm like, that's the one place I'll never get rid of that stupid name. So that and Bank of America, because they won't listen to me. So then all following amendments require team leader signature. So basically anything you're doing, yes. So here's why, especially because we're new, right?
Yeah.
I get something under contract. It's in my name.
Mhm.
You and I have a conversation about an amendment we're going to make to the contract that I agreed to.
Mhm.
You don't get it. My client doesn't get it. You write something in a weird way
Mhm.
because you're not used to kind of using words the way that we use words. And you get that client to sign something that they agree to that's really not what we intended. I have a great example if you think about it. But so I want to see anything that's going down with the contract that requires signatures. If you're seeing it, I don't care,
Someone
right?
should be looking at it.
Right, somebody, right, like, or like, you know, we've got a lot of stuff going on right now with this one, single family rental home that's getting kind of quirky. When things are getting quirky and we're going back and forth and it's really not routine at all. I'm the one that has the relationship and the name with the client. I'm the one that stands to have a infraction filed against me or an ethical complaint against me or a lawsuit against me. So we're changing contingencies or numbers or rights of the client. I just want to see it. And so we just put it with a little LH. Oh, she signed off on this? Great, right? There we go. Yep, 2 minutes. Woo, okay, well, we're finally done. So when you get something under contract, then we got a whole other thing that we're going to do. Maybe next time we do a longer training. But you're going to, these are your responsibilities as an agent. The fully executed contract needs to go to a lot of people, right? The buyer, the listing agent, it's not on here, but the listing agent should have had it by the last signing, right? The lender, and we don't go, hey, buyer, send this to your lender, because they take 3 days and they cost you're controlling the timeline, right? So you're going to copy their lender, you'll have their pre-approval.
All those people
Right.
on the same email.
Yep, and Shelley, right? So I have a template of how we write them a message to a buyer. We copy the lender, we copy Shelley, and we go, hey, blah, blah, blah. Here's your loose timeline of the most important things. You got to do an inspection by this date. I'm going to do your earnest money by this date. I'm going to send you a link, right? Shelley's going to give you the full deadline later, right? But just right now, stop, drop, and roll, right? So we then go into the MLS and we send them a link from something called trust funds that allows them to pay that earnest money. They have usually 3 business days to pay it, right? We tell them,
We've written that in.
yeah, because I write 3 businesses the way that I write it. so that because they can't submit it on the weekend, right? So 3 business days. Inspection contingency deadline, we count that out, right? So we go, oh, okay, we got agreement today, and today is the 25th of April. We've got 10 days. So I get a calendar out. The 26th is day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is May something, right? And so now you have to buy, conduct, review, and respond to the seller in writing on an inspection on or before that day. So my guidelines and my template says, please order your inspection today, right? And schedule it to happen ASAP, right? We talked to them about whether or not they're going to walk through with the inspector. If they're here, I recommend they walk through with the inspector. If they're not, I ask them if they're going to fly in for it, right? And honestly, if I think that's a possibility, I would have asked them before, are you going to fly in to walk through this property or to do an inspection with the inspector? If you are, we need to make the timeline accommodate that. You need to think about when you're going to fly in now, before we're under a contract deadline,
Are
right?
you gonna make me do it?
Right.
Now I have to look at my.
Right.
I didn't learn to do it.
Right. I kind of don't, right? Like if you want me there, fine, sometimes, but not always. So then, so your insurance deadline is usually the same as your inspection deadline. And at the bottom of my template are recommendations to multiples of each. The full pack, and they can also use their own if they want, but most times they ask for who do we use repeatedly, right? So you're going to get that full packet, should include the broker disclosure and the buyer's agency agreement, right? And the wire fraud, it should say that there. And that just goes, that part of the disclosures just go to the buyer's side. The listing agent doesn't need to see your buyer's agreement or anything like that, right? So then you email the listing agent, thank you for getting this there's a template for this too. Introduce her to your transaction manager. Also, you did that in the last with your buyer. You will plan to update and be updated weekly. Be sure your buyer does not miss a deadline without action. So that's what that whole next presentation is about. But so you're going to plan like, all right, I've got open contracts. How do I manage my weekly updates? Guess what? You guys all attended Tuesday mornings at 9:30. Shelly's on here. She's telling me what's going on. I'm telling her what's going on. And after that meeting, I make sure to touch base with the buyer if I've not already been in contact for something. It kind of depends on the stage, right? So then there's the next presentation. We'll go to that at another time. I'm going to stop recording, and then you guys are great about not asking questions.